Hello everyone. Today we are looking at a game from 1986 between Lev Pogaevsky, Grandmaster from Soviet Union at the time, versus English Grandmaster John Nunn. I'm showing you this game because I want to illustrate an idea that I thought of while I was doing my last video, actually going over the Budapest Defense, and as I was looking at the game between Levan Aronian and Vasily Ivanchuk, and the barn burner game they had in the candidates in 2013, playing the Budapest, and I looked at this game and I said to myself, sometimes simpler is better. And so follow me in this game and we'll get into more of what I mean by that. Alright, remember, ChessAudiobooks is on Chess. ChessAudiobooks is also on chess.com and Twitter, Instagram. So, in this Budapest, again, Pogaevsky, the white pieces, he accepts the gambit, of course. John Nunn plays knight g4, knight f3, knight c6, and Pogaevsky plays the move bishop g5, which is not often played. Usually you'll see bishop f4, or you'll see knight c3 right away, or even knight bd2 right away. And so what's the idea behind bishop e7? Bishop e7, of course, prevents the queen from coming to e7, and it simplifies the position right away. The idea is very simple. At the bishop e7, just simply take the bishop, which is what happened in the game. Of course, if bishop f4, then the game can just transpose into main lines after bishop b4 check, and then you can go into knight c3 and all of that stuff like that, as we saw in the Levan Aronian Ivanchuk game. Knight c3, and then bishop takes knight check, etc., and then white has the double pawns. Queen comes to e7, white queen comes to d5, f6 is played. Matter of fact, I'll put some little graphics here of the general plan here for black. So usually black will play moves like f6 here, queen e7. Of course, after knight takes, after knight to c3, the bishop will capture, of course, castle, and of course the attack against this pawn. All right, so black will usually be a pawn down, and for compensation, he'll have white's damaged queen side to fight against. All right, this could lead to unbalanced positions, and sometimes black is able to find some compensation. But again, this opening is more useful as a surprise weapon, as it is not all the way. I'll put it like this: it doesn't have the recommendation of all the top grandmasters. I don't want to offend any Budapest fanatics out there. Actually, I don't think the opening is unsound itself. It's just that I think at the GM level, based on my study and understanding of it, I have several videos on the Budapest. It seems like there's just not that many opportunities for black as far as strategic opportunities. And so black usually winds up getting in these like kind of dull positions if white wants to play that way, where white just has a slight advantage and he can just kind of put pressure on black without black really having a lot of counter chances. Now, of course, if white plays into the main lines, the positions can get very wild, and that's usually what black is looking for: a lot of piece activity, a lot of counter chances, etc., etc. But remember, the title of this video is simple is best. So after bishop g5, bishop e7. Of course, we have to look at the other alternative, which is just simply f6, just gambiting the pawn straight away. And after e takes f6, black could, go for it And of course, knight c3 can be played, but this is not in the spirit of what we're trying to do. Now here, white can just simply play bishop d2. Why is that? Because in the other line, usually the pawn is already on e3, and the bishop cannot return to d2. So here, white can just simply play bishop d2, and let's say after knight f6, bishop takes b4, a3, knight c3, and just simply be up a pawn. Right, it's just a symmetrical position where black is down a pawn. So it just looks like black has literally given up a pawn for nothing, because it's not like black has this tremendous lead in development or some type of dynamic activity in the position. Again, keeping it simple. So in that situation, you could just play bishop d2. Another option is just play knight bd2. Just keep developing, and let's say again after knight takes f6, e3, d6, and again black finds himself in the same position where he's basically giving up a pawn without any kind of real compensation. All right, because if you're giving up a pawn, you at least want to have some kind of lead in development or attacking possibilities. Black has none of that in neither of these variations. So f6 is nothing to be worried about, and you can just take f6 and again bishop b4 check. Either you play bishop d2, or you could just simply play knight d2. And again, if you really want to, you can play knight c3 with positions analogous to those other lines where the pawns are doubled on the c file. And again, white is still better here, but like I said, if you want to keep it simple, you just play bishop d2 or knight bd2. So back to the game here, none played bishop e7. Polgaevsky just took, queen takes e7, knight c3 here, and now none castled here. All right, position is very simple and innocuous, but remember, white is up material, right? He's up a pawn. Now, just a quick heads up, there's already tactical pitfalls here to watch out for. For example, if none were to say try to capture the pawn right away, like knight g5, knight d5, what happened attacking the queen. And this is a theme I want you to remember. This pawn in these variations often is very sensitive. Either knight d5 or knight b5 attacking that pawn is usually a cause of concern, because it's awkward sometimes to try to defend that pawn. So here in this case, knight d5, the queen is already on e7, so therefore the queen has to go back. Knight takes, and now queen d4. And now black has to compromise his position somewhat, say after f6, for example, because if he moves the knight, then the pawn on g7 is going to be won. So f6, f4, and black really doesn't want to have to do all of these things and compromise his position. This is why he just castled right away. After knight c3, black just castled. Another move that has been seen during my research is queen b4. This move right away instinctively made my hairs stand on end, because again, you're just starting the game and you already moved the queen several times in the opening, going after pawns. So without even thinking how to refute this, I already knew that it was wrong, but I just wanted to share it with you. One of the simple ways to deal with this is just play queen d2. Alright, don't worry about the c pawn. And let's say, for example, queen c5 attacking the f2 pawn. just e4, castles. And again, knight d5. Remember, we spoke about the sensitivity of this pawn right here. a5. Why a5? Because instead of protecting that pawn, because b4 is the threat here. So e4, castle, knight d5, a5. For instance, if black plays knight c5, right, trying to capture the pawn and protect this pawn on c7 with the queen at the same time, then white would just continue knight takes e5, knight takes e5, b4. And notice that the queen is the only protector of c7. Queen d6, c5. And it becomes problematic. Now the queen cannot protect c7 any longer. If the queen goes to c6, for instance, then the knight will check on e7 and win the queen. So queen h6, and then this is just a sample line, but black is totally busted here. So queen b4 is not a good move and can just be simply answered by queen to d2. Again, this is basic amateur chess, beginner's chess, taking that pawn, again opening yourself up to all type of attacking possibilities. So again, knight d5 attacking b4. You got the rook coming to c1, e3 is coming, hitting the queen. So e3 can be played, for example. Rook c1, even giving up the a2 pawn. All of these moves are possible continuations. So, but I just wanted to show you those variations so you could just dismiss this idea of queen to b4. Alright, because these are the type of moves that players that aren't familiar with the variation, players that are uncomfortable, and players that are weaker, right, not as tactically alert, would play, right, running around with the queen, trying to snatch pawns, etc. And it's good to know how to refute right away, so you're not staring at the board and wondering like, oh my god, I just lost my c pawn. Nope, you just step on the gas pedal and you look for some basic attacking moves, and then you will have it. And here you would just play knight takes c7, rook b8, and then, for example, right after that, you keep on developing, keep it moving. We'll move like bishop b4, as the knight will be on c7 to support the bishop, hitting the queen again, gaining even more time. Alright, so let's get back to the game, shall we? So after knight c3, Grandmaster Nunn castled, as you should, protect your king. Knight d5, hitting the queen. Queen has to protect the c pawn. e3, knight g takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, and simply bishop e2. And now d6, and white castles. This is a position that is very important because it looks innocuous. It looks like black is just comfortable, right? Black can just develop pretty easily, bring his bishop out to f5. Eventually the rooks will come right to the open file, and although black is not threatening much, it seems white is not threatening much, and the game probably end in a draw. After all, black did get his pawn back. Okay, so what? White has a little bit more space. These are the type of positions, right, that grandmasters try to avoid, right, especially on the weaker side, because these are the type of positions that you will end up losing, where white has just a slight advantage with no chances of losing whatsoever. In other words, black has no real prospects in the position, and white has slight prospects. So these old school grandmasters, these old school Soviet grandmasters like Polgaevsky, they will play like this all day. with just a slight advantage and really no chance of losing at all. And so you might say, well, what does white's slight advantage consist of? One of the main problems is that white has more space in the center and on the queen side. Black has to deal with the problem of this knight on d5. What are you going to do about that knight? The knight can't just stay there because it's a thorn in black's side. Black can't really move his queen, right, without, risking the loss of the c pawn. The knight being in black's territory was always going to create threats of attacking possibilities and threats when combined with other pieces. So the knight must be kicked out of there. The problem is exactly how are you going to do it? Let's say, for example, if you traded a piece on d5, say bishop. Let's just imagine. Let's say bishop came out here to e6 and then just traded the knight, right? Now, what happens is, positionally and strategically, is that white captures with the pawn and now the c file is open. Remember, with this pawn on d5, that's going to hold this pawn here. And strategically, the rooks are going to come to the open file and put tremendous pressure on the c file and on this pawn. It's going to be hard to advance that pawn because of the pawn that still exists here on d5. And even if black does advance it, once white captures, let's say if black goes to c5, white captures en passant, black is going to end up with hanging pawns or isolated pawn on the C and D files. Alright, and so that is easy game for white, where he can put a lot of pressure. Yes, can black draw? Of course he can. But black is going to be suffering for a long time and have to play accurately, where white's game is pretty simple. That's the problem here. It looks very simple and straightforward. It looks like it's not that many problems, but when you go on and on in the game, these are the type of problems that black has to deal with. So d6, castle. Again, so how does none decide to deal with it? Well, he plays c6. Do I really have to explain the problem with c6? c6, okay, it kicks the knight out. However, now the d5 is weak. So d5, a file is already sent. The d file is already a semi-open file, so it's easy to play. Say for instance, queen d2 or queen c2, and bring the rooks to the d file. So now it's another problem again that black has to deal with. Again, white does not have to worry. So knight c3, knight c3 goes back, and combined with the c pawn, it prevents black from being able to play d5, because black would love to play this liberating move d5 and get rid of the weakness. So bishop e6. So now you have the battle for d5. Okay, b3 here, and now queen a5 attacking the knight. Not really a big deal. Queen d2 and rook a d8. So queen d2, use the time to attack the knight and develop the rook at the same time. f4, hitting the knight. None doesn't want to go passive, so plays bishop g4. So little tactics, little tactics at play here. Bishop d1, bishop takes d1, rook a d1. Good move by Pogoevsky, where he forces black to develop his rook to the d file. So again, you see black is just under this constant pressure, trying to equalize. Knight g4, h3, knight h6, and now e4. So this makes it extra hard now for this pawn push. f4, f5. And of course, black would love for white to capture on f5, because then he could just bring the knight to f5 gloriously, and the knight would be like an albatross in the position. But of course, experienced Soviet master's not gonna go for that. Rook fe1 is played, and now there's ideas of coming to the seventh rank here. So capture at some point, and then come to the seventh rank. White doesn't really want to make this capture, so say if black makes the capture, then the rook can capture and then eventually make it to the second rank. So this is why rook fe8 is played. King h2 is making some room for the king, getting the king out of any checking possibilities on the dark square. F takes e4. Finally, rook takes e4. Rook takes e4 and knight takes e4. Of course, the endgame is good for white with the same reasons that I explained before. And you can see as we wind on down the road and we get closer and closer to the ending, you can see the weakness is still there that I spoke about early on in the game. And this is what I was talking about. The position looks like drawish and okay, there's going to be a handshake soon, but it's that constant pressure. And that's how these top players would play. And of course, they still play like that, but this is just an example that sometimes simple is best. You don't need fireworks to try to refute an opening, right? If somebody plays something offbeat like Budapest or say Alban counter gambit, obviously they want some type of tactical melee where they feel more comfortable in the position than you do. You get confused or you use a lot of time on the clock, and now you're lost because you made a blunder even though you were better because you took too much time. No, Pogaevsky just played real simple line. Bishop g5, shaded off some pieces and forced black into slightly inferior position. Queen h5, again going for tactics as he should in the inferior position. Ideas like knight g4 come to mind, for example. Knight g5, knight f7, and now knight f3 and d5. So black tries to make a break right here. Again, just being under pressure for so long, he finally decides, hey, I'm gonna go for it. After all, the queen is on d2, rook is here on d8, so he figures it's safe to make this break. Another thing is now this square is available, but this is why, or one of the reasons why rather, the knight is on f7, right, to prevent Pogaevsky from being able to utilize the square. But unfortunately for Nunn, this is a mistake here, although he's in the worst position because Pogaevsky just simply played queen e3. Problem is there's some back rank problems. So for example, after queen e3, if d takes e4, then just simply rook takes d8, knight takes d8, and queen e7 with the idea of attacking this knight. So if knight f7, then it would just be checkmate after queen e8. And of course, knight e6, just capture the knight, of course, with check. And if the queen, say, try to move here to d5, for example, then the queen, then the e8 square is no longer protected, and then just queen e8 would be mate. So this is why Nunn could not capture. Instead of d5, a move like h6, giving some room to the king, might have been better, although white is still much better in the position. Let's say at the rook e1, finally d5, and then g4. And then the position would be slightly different, but white is in the driver's seat here, just taking more and more space in the position. Another idea is queen f5 too. Again, rook e1, and you can see how white continues to dominate the position. in this sample variation. D5 is understandable, but a mistake. So what happened is after queen e3, queen f5 was played, and now c takes d5, c takes d5, and now again the isolated pawn appears. g4, queen c2, rook d2, queen c7, and that it's based on tactics again with the back rank. If queen e4, just queen takes e4, d takes e4, rook d8, knight d8, and knight d4, and again black is going to lose this king and pawn ending. Alright, that isolated pawn is going to drop. And one thing that you might want to remember about knight endings is that you basically can treat knight endings, or view knight endings for the most part, the same way you would view pure king and pawn endings. So knight and pawn endings usually follow the same type of principles with the king and pawn endings. Again, this is just a sample line, but again, with the isolated pawn, eventually it's going to drop. It's too close to the white king. And if the move queen c6, just protecting the d pawn, then you can see that the a pawn is hanging. And again, isolated pawn, and it's just a matter of time before white earns the victory. So here, none chose to go for the dynamic approach and play queen c7. Rook takes d5, and now rook f8. Right, with some kind of pressure here. King g3, knight d8, and now just queen e5. Of course, white wants to simplify classic Soviet school chess. Queen c1. Right, getting rid of all dynamic options in the position. Knight f7, and again, pawn. None realizes he's lost, so he's just going for Hail Marys at this point. Queen b2, queen e7, the queen takes a2, and the rest really requires little commentary as white just squeezes the victory out of black here. h6 check, king g8, g6, h takes, queen takes g6, king h8, and then just simply rook takes f7, and that is all she wrote. So I hope you enjoyed that game. I'll post some more links at the bottom. Please check the links as always. There's DVDs, books that I always try to post specifically related to the subject matter of the video that we talked about. Also check the links that appear on the screen. Please consider supporting the channel. Get in the comments below. Let me see what you think of this game, and let me know what you think about the Budapest in general, or if you play it as black, or what you think about this particular line. Very simple line, very innocuous. Again, it's not a guarantee, oh, you're just gonna win, of course, but what I like about it is that on the rare occasions that you might face a Budapest defense, it's nice to have something real simple, and that you can keep the game in serene and calm waters and have a nice simple, straightforward strategy to approach. So just to conclude, once again, the major problem with this particular pawn structure here is black has to really be careful on how he chooses to oust that knight from d5. Another thing to remember is always remember the pressure that that white is able to put on the c7 square. All right, there's always some type of tactics in the midst where sometimes the king has to be tied down to the defense of that square. So let me know what you think, and please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next video.